engage with what my grandchildren are doing and what their parents are doing with them, and then I always add my feedback or my input into that. So
you know, you started where, when I asked you that question, something that really resonated with me, because you said you start with talking with,
mm-hmm,
you didn't say
mm-hmm,
talking to.
mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm,
do think
mm-hmm.
that very often part of, no, I don't want to say, I don't want to be too harsh by saying the problem, but I do think that part of the, one of the things, the mistakes that parents make is that we, especially if you're a little older, but talking to as if yours is the only word, as opposed to, and I think
Talking with.
Holly, you noted in your remarks and others did, being respectful of the fact that these are young adults that you're bringing up.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
you have to get them in a place where they are confident
Yes.
and comfortable that they can be respected. You
Mm-hmm,
get out what you put in. And so it really, and I don't know if it was a subconscious thing for you and it's just the way you are, but I thought it just resonated immediately when you said you're talking with,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
you're, because
mm-hmm.
you're allowing them then to give you some feedback or to ask the questions. I think sometimes for parents, this sense of, you know, we're back to the old fashioned because I
Right. Do
said so.
do as I say kind of thing. Yes.
Right.
And that
And
doesn't
and
work.
and
Yeah.
and it's so counterintuitive and
Yes.
counterproductive to
Yes, it is.
everything that we are teaching our children to be, because you don't want them to just accept it because it's being told to them,
Mm-hmm,
except when you say it. And that's when you run into the sort of the clash of the titans, where they're sort
mm-hmm,
of like, but wait, you know,
mm-hmm.
that's
Right.
I have a thought, I have some opinion, and
Yes.
you can't squash it down. That's, you know, to me, that's not, squashing it is not good parenting. You can
Right.
get that two-way flow, and
Mm-hmm.
it can be respectful. So Carmen, we haven't heard from you for a while, so I'm going to bring you back into the picture, and you've heard from, I know these are your colleagues and friends. For those of you obviously who weren't on the call at the very beginning when we were sort of doing our check-in, it was like being at a family reunion when these
Mm-hmm.
ladies first got on. There was a palpable excitement and pleasure that they all got from seeing each other. So I know that you are aware of your colleagues' thinking, but talk to us a little bit again, especially around, you're having these conversations, you're talking with the expansion beyond your, you know, that word that we all know now in COVID world, the bubble. How do you expand beyond your bubble? You know, how do you get out? I know, Marsha, you talked about, you know, well, you talk to other parents and so on, but talk a little bit more about how you make this become a thing. How do you make this a movement? How do you
Mm.
move this? You know, how do we become TikTok stars? Where about about how do we get onto Ellen because we've sort of said this is something? How do we do that?
I I don't think I quite understand the question.
So
Rephrase it for me.
okay, so we, you know, Marsha talked about, well, you can talk with other parents perhaps, you know, but how do we get people to understand? How do we open up these conversations? Are these conversations beyond maybe the parents in your community? Do we do more of these kind of talks? Do we do white papers? How do we get the word out there? Because again, you don't want to seem to be lecturing, but you sent to me a couple of articles, and what I found very interesting in those articles was everybody said pros and cons. There are definitely pros to social media, communicating, keeping up, a
Mhm.
sense of self-worth. The flip of that is the sense, maybe the sense of lack of worth, because maybe you're not, as you, Maxine, alluded to, you're not seeing people who look like you, or maybe you're overweight and you're looking at a lot of stuff that's body negative about that. So how do we get out more of this thinking around there's good and bad, and it's okay to, but parents monitor, pay attention? How do we do that?
Well, we use the good aspects, the positive aspects of social media. You know, there are positives and negatives. Social media is great at getting information out. And so if we want to use it as a vehicle for getting information to parents, we certainly can do that. Here, we are using this format here, this discussion, and it's on YouTube. I saw YouTube on the list as a social medium, right? So we can do podcasts, right? We can do Zoom meetings. There is, even in these COVID times, we can get information out. We can spread the word as much as we want to whomever we want to. And that's the good thing about social media. I can ask my children, I don't have an Instagram account, but I have asked my daughter to put stuff up on Instagram. I don't know if websites, it's not on the list here, but I don't know if websites are considered social media. They might be informational media, but hey, create a website. I've created a website for the book, and this discussion here is going to be placed on the website like the other one is. So to reach parents, we have several media opportunities. To reach children, we have the same. And so we can utilize them in a positive manner. We can utilize social media to inform, to educate, to encourage, you know, to create, to develop adults and children. And children teenagers can use social media with those same objectives in mind. Parents can use social media. I love Maxine, Letty. I think everybody, Holly, Marcia, everyone talked about the fact that you should know what you want for your kids, right? Before even you get pregnant, you should be thinking about, if I have a child, this is what I would want. This is how I would want to move and shape him or her. Now, let me see if I can find information on Facebook, on Google, or, you know, wherever to inform me of how I can intentionally parent my child. So I will make the best use, the most positive use of social media to get information out to parents.
Yeah. I do think, thank you. And I do think as parents, one of the things that we have to learn to do is to educate ourselves. I think all of you have touched on this in one way or another, but all social media is not created equal.
No.
True.
And some are pretty passive and fairly innocuous, and some are not. You noted, for instance, Carmen, it was on one of the lists, 4chan, which is an anonymous web communication website, but it is an alt-right tool. It's so because it is anonymous. And so, you know, if your child is on there, then they're being exposed to a certain way of thinking. I think the other thing that we have to remember and to be able to share with our children and with other parents too, who may not think about this, are the consequences. I was looking just before I came on, I was looking at the story about the Teen Vogue editor. I don't know if any of you know about this. So this happened maybe about a month or so ago. A young Black woman who was going to be the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue, pretty big job, who never started because a few years ago, when she was in her teens, she posted negative comments about Asians. Those came back. people had found them,
Mm.
people read them and published them. And what I'm assuming for her, for any, you know, would have been a dream job. If you're a journalist in a particular type, you know, being the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue is going to be a big deal. And she did not start, because the outcry before, once those became public, and we've seen this sort of story time and time again, but I thought it was a timely one, because here is the young woman, you know, who, and it was very recent, you know, I think she's in her 20s, she did this when she was 18 or 19, so within a 10-year gap, it came back to bite her, and seriously took away what, as I said, would have been her dream job. And so I think part of the messaging that we have to convey, or that people need to understand, are the consequences. Somebody talked about it earlier around, you know, jobs, and because I don't know of an employer nowadays that the first thing that HR does, they go to look at your media pages. They go to look at your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter. And so those things that you thought were funny, and, you know, at 15 or 16, it does seem a little unfair that you'll be judged at what you put at 15, at 16, at 20 something, but that's the way life is. It's not fair. And so I do think some of the messaging that we need to be able to convey is that nothing really goes away.
Yeah.
That's another part of this social media, that, you know, at the time you think you're the class clown and it's all very funny, and here you are saying or doing whatever, and, you know, 10, 15 years later, when you're going for that job, or, you know, or even trying to get into a doctoral program or something, and this is going to come up and maybe catch you a little bit there. But I think we focused a lot on the negative, but can we talk for a few moments about what are the positives of social media? What do you see as, and you know, we've talked a little bit about COVID, so let's talk a little bit about what you see as the positives of social media engagement. And Maxine, I'll start with you.
Certainly.
Oh, sorry, Holly, you're next.
No, it's okay. I just have a quick story to tell. You know, Maxine, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So this was just a quick story. So I'm on what's called the neighborhood school readiness team. And so during COVID, one of the people that were on the team, you know, it's in a certain community, was concerned about the fact that young children were outside without any masks. So mostly children under the 5 and 6 in her neighborhood and on the playground. So anyway, she starts to talk about TikTok, and, you know, and I, of course, know nothing. And anyway, so to make a long story short, which is not my gift, she has her son. I mean, she totally gets what TikTok is. She talks to her son about what the dilemma is. He creates a whole TikTok little scenario for the importance of doing this, that kind of addressed both from a parent, he pretends, because he understands TikTok, he pretends he's the parent talking to the 5-year-old or 4-year-old. Then he does a whole thing as if he's the 4-year-old. Anyway, this whole thing takes about 45 seconds. And then he gets his friend who speaks Spanish to come in and kind of sum up the whole thing. And part of her concern was that maybe families don't have access or understand that there are particular face masks for very little kids. So he does some sort of little promo thing about that, and tells people, you know, you can donate. Bring it to your neighborhood elementary school, etc. The whole thing has been taken care of on TikTok for the whole community.
Wow.
Right.
So there's a positive story.
It is, you know, when she brought it up, I was like, okay. And I said to her, I don't even know what TikTok is. And da, 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 da. So of course that was a whole other thing. Then I spoke with her son, who's 12 years old, trying to get me into TikTok. But anyway, you asked about a positive thing.
Yeah, that's a positive story.
I think it's a great story, and I
is.
thought he was so creative.
Yeah, and it's actually an example of what Carmen said earlier about taking it to where people are. So if this is where people are on social media, then let's take it to them so that they don't have to dig in too far. So Maxine, you were going to tell us something.
Well, I see it, it's more of we see it as a tool. So it's a great place for discovery, for learning, and also sharing, right? So social media, we use it, especially now that we can't travel because we're big travel buffs, is we can travel by looking at what folks, have put up online for different sites. There's Amazon has this little travel blog now, and you can travel to Japan and make sushi in Japan. Right. So it's a great tool for learning, for communicating, for sharing, and it brings us to a more global society. So we can communicate here in DC with somebody in Kenya or somebody in Japan. So those are the positives of it. And, as Carmen was talking about, ways we can do it to expand this whole idea, right? The knowledge that we have about parenting. This to me was very fascinating because when we think about parenting, right, folks think about parenting when they become pregnant, right? A lot of folks are not, there may be families that plan, but then they become pregnant. And then it's just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm going to have a family. And then you have the opportunity to maybe go to live podcasts like this to see and learn about parenting skills, but also the fundamentals of just being a whole person, right? Because it makes me think that we are fortunate and we have the education, we have the experiences, but where are the other things that we're fortunate about is I'm fortunate to be brought up by a Caribbean grandma, right? And I think you can sense pieces of that in my upbringing because that name is really important in that Caribbean family, right? And the notion of how important family is. And so in this global, very virtual world that we in, this virtual community can become a family for those who become isolated. Is I see that what's happened with social media is there have been some social emotional gaps for young children and developing teens. And to spin it is to use this to fulfill those social emotional gaps. Because what they've done with a lot of social media is look at the antisocial behaviors that we can take and just spin it around and use it for those.
Oh, so we've got a little technical difficulty. Hopefully Maxine will be able to join us back in a moment. Marsha, oh, we're back. So Maxine, we lost you and I think you are frozen there again, but I'm going to go over to Marsha for the time being, and then we'll come back to you because we missed that last little piece of what you were saying. But Marsha, your thoughts?
So other benefits?
The benefits are
okay.
Because the thing is it's with us and we
right.
can't get rid of it. The horse is out of the stable. And
right.
So how do we make it work for us? How do we make it our tool?
So I want to talk about it from a couple of perspectives. One, as a grandparent, right, it really has been a great way for me to get to stay in touch with my grandkids, for example, because prior to COVID, I was not engaged in social media that much. I think I had a Facebook page probably for a year or so, but then I never did anything on it. And then during COVID, I started, when I see people post something, I say, oh, cute, awesome, things like that, like one word or something. So my daughter said, Mommy, that's not really engaging. And I said, oh, but you know what? I would really like to engage with the kids more so. So I use it in that way. And then I started using it for my business. But there are so many benefits. I did a workshop with grandparents around this where we talked about it's a way for grandparents and kids to stay connected because, in the beginning of COVID, we had to be at a distance. And if you're far away from your grandchildren anyway, that Facebook, Instagram it turned out to be one of the fabulous ways for you to stay in touch with them. The other thing is that I think it also can help us, for grandparents, for example, that may be living by themselves, feel less isolated from family. It also could help us bond stronger with friends. Now, with all the children being out of school, for example, in the very beginning, it kind of helped them kind of stay connected with their friends. So that was a huge benefit for teenagers, especially. And then they have some social media platforms where you remember I was talking about, like the one like Holla, where they sometimes you use it in a negative way, but there's some that you can use in a positive way where you can kind of help with real world examples of things, and so that is like a teaching tool.
Mm.
And so that's another positive, I think, or another benefit that can be used, that in which we can use social media. So the thing is, again, when you talked about what we could do to kind of get parents and put this information out for parents, I thought about, and I wrote this idea down, maybe Carmen needs to do a 4 R's of parenting masterclass. Right, because that seems to be the thing these days. Everybody's doing a master class.
Yeah.
And so these are things that I think parents could benefit from. A podcast is great as well. I think she mentioned that. But just putting the information out there, doing these little timely things, because people, is my understanding, I've been trying to get more versed in social media myself now for my business. And so it's my understanding that you do something short but powerful. So maybe a 15-minute something, or 20-minute something, because people don't have a lot of time and they'll pay attention to it, but if you do an hour lecture, they're going to say, okay, So you see what I mean? And I think that would be a great way to kind of keep this going.
Yeah.
Because again, families need it. They really need it. And they need it now more so than ever.
I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Carmen, I'm going to come back to you, sort of the final word, if you will, but I'm holding the book up again. And the 4 R's are respect, responsibility, reciprocity, and restraint. And I actually think that so much of what we've talked about this afternoon, ladies, has all of those elements in it. I think the restraint in terms of put down the phone.
Mm-hmm.
You can, have some restraint, talk to, have family time, make sure that you are communicating with your children, make sure that they understand that that you're there for them, and that there is nothing that they can bring to you. First of all, just because it seems like, oh, this is all new, doesn't mean to say that we haven't seen and heard it all. There is really nothing new under the sun. There may be new vehicles, just as, at one point, all cars were running on petrol and now they're electric cars. Nevertheless, they're still cars.
Right.
The very same way, there is nothing in parenting that they could bring to us that we wouldn't know of, have heard of, experienced, etc. So I think it's important for that. So that's the restraint, the respect. We talked about the fact that having conversations with, being respectful of the fact that their experience is a little bit different to ours. Mm-hmm. And so that when they come to us, we shouldn't poo-poo what they're talking about or make it seem as if that's easy, just don't do it, because we're just in a very different place and time. Responsibility. I think, Holly, in your comment in the book, you said being a parent is a responsibility. So with that comes everything that goes with it. That means that you are maybe going to have to make some sacrifices, or you are going to have to indeed put your foot down and be the unpopular one. Mm-hmm. That maybe they complain about a little bit, but I always contend that the parent that the child complains about, ultimately when they grow up, and they're blessed to have their own children, will say, boy, she was really good.
Mhm.
And then reciprocity, which, again, I think goes along with the respect. You give, you get.
Yes.
Now, so Maxine, sorry, you'd gone off a little bit. So at the very end, we missed, and I don't want our viewers or for the group here to miss. You'd said something at the end that unfortunately we missed.
It was really about how this gives us an opportunity to be more of a global family. And so no matter where we are in COVID or post-COVID, this social media has taught us that distance is no longer a hurdle.
Mhm.
And that we can use this in such a positive way to impact families. And they're, these single parent families, children who are growing up and spending less time with their families, they can still have some type of touch point with folks who can teach them the positive ways to develop and connect on social media.
Mhm.
For sure. Thank you. Carmen, you're the author. You are the convener of this group. So I think it's only appropriate and fitting that yours are the last words before we end. So what would you like to share with us at the end here?
Oh, I'm concerned that Letty has fallen off.
Right.
Yes.
What happened? But it's an important topic, the impact of social media on parenting and child rearing. We just barely scratched the surface.
Mhm.
Barely scratched the surface in about 45 minutes. And so I am encouraging parents to get online, Google, the topic, influence of, impact of social media on parenting, on children, whatever they want to learn, Google and find out. By the way, is Google considered social media?
That's a good question, but because it's passive, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it is, and I do want to say
it's
something.
more educational media, right?
Yeah, but I do want to say something, as I know I'm letting you have that last word, but it's specific to something you just said about Googling, in fact, and and it is a great resource. But as I'd said earlier, understanding that none of these things are, some are for good and some are for not so good. And so I think it is your responsibility as a parent, and it's incumbent upon you to not simply take the child's word that, oh yeah, I'm just doing this, don't worry about it. But as I said, I had heard about 4chan, but didn't really know much about it, but did look it up for this. And, as I said, it's an alt-right favorite. So take that for what it's worth. But in my mind, that does ring alarm bells. But I don't want to pick it out as the only thing. I think first of all, you should be taking care to see what your child is looking at on the phone. 9 times out of 10, you're paying for that phone anyway. So I think you should be able to see what's on it. Yes. When you do see what's on it, take the time, take the responsibility. We're back to the 4 R's. Take the time, the responsibility to see what that vehicle is for. What is that app? What's it supposed to do? And then if you don't like it, if you feel like it's not giving your child the things that you want them to know, then talk to them about it. Bear in mind, the reality is, if they've got it, their friend has it. So even if you've taken it off their phone, they can see it on their friend's phone. But I think to Maxine's point earlier, and to all that all of you have said, if you stand up a child who is clear on what's good and what's right, they'll make decisions for themselves in that context. They'll understand that even as they're looking at it on their friend's phone, it's iffy, it's questionable. It doesn't pass the sniff test really. They may continue to do it, but I do think that having some context and some understanding of protecting the Maloney name, for instance, or the McLean name, or Blum name, or whatever the name, the Barbell name is, that's an important thing. I think so much of this is not just about being, being a sort of, you won't, you can't, I forbid you, but providing that context and understanding that we've all been teenagers, because if we got to here, that means we were teenagers at one point or another.
Yeah.
And we all know very well that regardless of who brought us up, and I'm going to assume we were all brought up with many of the same elements, that you get tempted. You've got friends. The friends seem to be doing fine. They haven't turned into a pillar of salt. They haven't sunk,
Yet.
So
No.
yet, that's right. But but you're up against the reality of what they see as how bad can it be, because my friend is still fine, right? And you're sort of saying, oh, something bad is going to happen, and they're sort of looking and saying, but my friend is okay. You're up against that, so you have to be able to put that into context and work with them on that by providing that listening ear, that respect, I think, that restraint, that reciprocity, all of the 4 R's, which, Carmen, just come up time and time again. But I took the time away from you. I cede back to you.
Well, I think that parents need to be aware of what their children are watching and doing on social media. Take the time. All these ladies said that. Take the time to find out how your children are using social media. Talk to them about it. There are pros and cons. There are good things and bad things. Don't knock it. Don't knock it by saying it's all bad, because kids can use social media in very positive ways. It can help them with their homework. It can expose them to the World Wide Web allows for exposure to the world. They can connect with people. They can connect with families who live in different countries and different states. They can communicate with their teachers. They can do so much positive things on social media. But parents, be alert. Always be alert. Know what they're doing, what they're saying about themselves. You mentioned earlier, young ladies get on there and 13-year-olds may say they're 18, and they put on there where they live, which school they go to. So they're targeted by these morons who, take advantage of kids. So you need to be talking to your children about do's and don'ts of using social media. I use social media. I use WhatsApp. Hey, it's a free service to me. I call my peeps in Guyana and, all over the world on WhatsApp. It doesn't cost me anything financially, but I'm sure it's costing me something. I would like to know what it's costing me. Maybe it's costing me in the way that the WhatsApp folks use my information, my personal information, So I also use Facebook, and on Facebook, I have connected with nieces, nephews, great nieces and nephews that I would not have seen or known outside of Facebook. So I'm grateful. So my final word to parents, grandparents, and everyone, teachers, teenagers, know the pros and cons, know how it'll benefit you, and know how it can rob you of your dignity, like the young ladies who overly sexualize themselves, and as Anita said, looking for a job, and what you said in in 2021, when you're applying for that job in 2031, it can come back and get you. When I applied for an important position, I was asked, are you on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, Twitter? I said, I'm on Facebook, and the response was, okay, we'll give it a check. I was shocked. I did not even know that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So someone said it, someone of the ladies said it, be careful what you share about yourself
Yeah.
on social media. Parents, I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back a tiny bit. Because we have a few more minutes. We've got 6 minutes. I'm going to reserve a minute for myself because I want to make sure that I touch on a couple of things. But I'm going to start on what is my top left, Marsha. Last minute thought.
Okay. I would say I would kind of kudo what Carmen said, but I want to add, it's important for parents to know the risk and to communicate that with their children so that they will have a better understanding. I agree with her. Let's look at the pros and cons of this thing. It could go left, real quick. And so I think that's important for parents to share that information with children, of course, at a certain age. I think with teenagers, they need to know the pros and cons. I agree with that. They also need to know the benefits. I think that parents need to take a look at whatever it is that they're on their phones or their computers or both. I know that there are some parental guidance limits and things like that you can do with very young children. But when the child is 14, 15, I'm not so sure if that changes or not, because again, I read in my preparation today that they're at 13, they're allowed to have their own accounts. And so when that happens, I think parents still need to make sure that they are watching and paying attention to, because there are some negative impacts. It can impact a child intellectually, psychologically, as well as socially. And so I think keeping those things in mind will help us as parents and grandparents make those decisions about whether or not we want children to engage and how we want them to engage. Because we know for the most part they're going to, but so it becomes really how they're going to engage.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Holly, last minute sharing. Oh, you are still on mute.
I think that the social media perspective, bringing in the social media perspective, is a very interesting perspective in terms of having us step back and look at the 4 R's. And then what are the connections between the 4 R's and social media? The use of social media, how we learn ourselves about social media, and then what are the messages that we think, and how do we convey those messages to our children, especially in the framework of the 4 R's. So, and I think we've spent a lot of time talking about teenagers, but I want to go all the way back to what does that look like, as the parent, as a parent takes the child to the playground. The child's 3 years old, and as I witnessed yesterday, I don't think the parent looked up from her phone for 8 or 9 minutes.
Such an important point.
Right.
Such an important point. This is not.
I think it's a lifespan kind of. It's become a lifespan kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. Put down your phone is to all parties.
Right.
Maxine.
Thank you. I have to echo what my colleagues have said. And also, I would say in closing that social media does not relieve us from our parenting jobs, right? It's not an excuse to no longer parent. That parenting is a responsibility that's lifelong, and it's actually an honor, right? You have been bestowed a human being, a life, and that life, from the minute it arrives, you're responsible. And this new world of social media does not relieves of those duties, and it makes us even more. It makes it even more important that we pay closer attention, we're involved, and we talk and make sure that it's age appropriate. That we're just not handing the world, because that's what we're doing with social media, is we're handing our precious commodity to the world. And then the world can damage that commodity in a split second.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, ladies, unfortunately, we did lose Letitia, but hopefully she'll go back and look at this. So I want to say thank you to Letitia, Marsha, Holly, Maxine, and of course, a very special thank you to Carmen for convening this important discussion. I do hope that we'll find opportunities, as we've all talked about, to keep expanding this message, whether it's informally through conversations, through referrals to the book, to referrals to looking at the YouTube of this, or to then going on to that next level, taking the fight, if you will, to where the battleground is on social media. Again, the book, The 4 R's of Parenting. Ladies, thank you. Yes. Yes, very much.
Mother's Day gift.
The Mother's
Yeah.
Day gift. Absolutely.
There
That
you
you
go.
can give
There
to
you go.
fathers on the same day and tell them they're
Father's
getting
Day.
their gift early.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to grandparents too. Thank you again, ladies. It's been an honor and a pleasure listening to you this afternoon. My name is Annette Hall of ICMBC. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
It's been an honor.
Yes.
Privilege for me.